I'm glad you could all hang around and hear a little bit about what's going on with our organization. Thanks, Craig, for the introduction. And I wanted to thank Later 123 for putting together this event. This has been a really good event. All the right people from the area are here. A lot of you are here from out of the country. And I've had some of the best conversations I've had in a long time on the topic of NFV and this market. So briefly, I'm going to talk about what the TIA is, who we are, what we do, why we're around, and why we're here. TIA is a member-run nonprofit industry association. Among our activities, we have a policy group that lobbies on the U.S. Capitol Hill for regulatory issues and for policymakers and things like that on behalf of our membership. We do have events throughout the year, including our annual event in June, which I have a little flag on here for if you guys are interested in attending that. We will have a virtualization track while we're there. It'll be more high-level education for the people who don't know as much about NFV, but it'll be an interesting conversation. We also have a technology effort going forward to both inform and educate the world and the market about what's going on in the telecommunications space, and also to bring together the experts in the industry when they need to work on solutions as a group. Industry-wide led efforts, often resulting in standards, but also can be things like white papers and reference architectures, recommendations, and the like. And that is a lot of what we do. We focused on next generation networks, which is our way of talking about 5G, but we also have 4.5G advanced and other things coming along. We have the Internet of Things, which we're having a lot of seminars on right now, and we're starting to develop some standards with our participation in 1M2M and other associations. We are working with cybersecurity primarily on the policy side. We work very closely with regulators and with agencies and policymakers in the U.S. government. And then in virtual networks, which is our discussion about SDN and NFV, which I'm going to talk more about right now. We also have an effort to drive startups and to drive the next generation of our economy, of our telecom economy. And bringing in this new software-driven network is going to open the door for a lot of innovation. Once we start seeing open networks from our carriers and we allow people who don't know the traditional way of how you build a telecom network get to design their own networks, we're going to see a lot of very creative stuff happen. I know we're years away from that, but it's the kind of thing we've got to start incubating right now to get those young people and those smart people engaged so that they can bring us the new ideas that are going to change the future for us. So let's talk a little bit about what TIA is doing in the NFV space. We do a lot of thought leadership. We do contributed articles. We act as a high, like 10,000-foot expert when the general press wants to talk to someone about NFV in general. We have our conference tracks and our other webinars and workshops and things like that we produce and run where we have thought leadership discussions and debates and panel sessions and things like that. We do a lot of contributed articles where we write about the issues that our members are interested in and then contribute those to the press in various areas. We do a lot of education of the government, which is a very important activity because those guys on a whim can write a regulation that catch all of us off guard, and they need to know what they're getting into before they do that. And so we write briefs, we sit down with regulators and policymakers and just explain to them the topics that they're looking into, make sure that they're on the right path, and then they can make the decisions that they make, at least with a little bit of knowledge about what they're doing. And then we also do a lot of activities around various industry events, like at CES and GlobeCom and CTIA and other things, where we just get together and talk at the 10,000-foot level and do some nice education for the masses that aren't as deep into this technology as this group is. Then we also have our technology program, which I am in charge of as the Chief Technology Officer of the TIA. And with that, we have a big push on IoT with 5G, and we're doing a lot of pure NFV work. We have a CTO council where we bring the strategists and thought leaders from the industry, from around the world, together and discuss the common issues that they're worried about. And it was interesting, the last time we had a meeting, they specifically said they wanted to talk about IoT and 5G, and we spent 4 hours talking about NFV the entire time, because they saw NFV as the underlying required technology in order for IoT and 5G to be successful. And I thought that was really fascinating, that their desire to talk about IoT and 5G turned out to be an NFV discussion. We also have a lab program that we're working on right now. We haven't kicked it off yet, even though we announced it back in November. We're putting together a large compatibility lab with the idea of being able to show general compatibility between all the VNF components that are being developed in the world today. Obviously, we're years away from that being a reality. We're trying to promote that and drive that forward. So we're working with all the stakeholders that we're in touch with to help build out this lab architecture to test that stuff. And then finally, I'm here to announce, brand new, we are starting an NFV security working group. We had our first meeting to get the group formed this past Wednesday, and we are driving towards a goal of alleviating the fears that the customers have, that would be the carriers, network operators, and service providers, about the security aspects of NFV. Now, some of the security aspects are already being addressed. There are activities going on in ETSI and OPNFV and IETF and MEF and various other associations to try to address specific issues relating to security. We're not here to try to replace or compete or contradict any of those activities. In fact, what we're looking to do is kind of be the clearinghouse for all those activities so that the carriers can look to one source to know what's going on, understand where it fits, how it fits, and everything else, and then look at all the gaps that exist between those efforts and figure out how we can address those. During our meeting this past week, one of the gaps that stood out was the fear that just inherently exists with a lot of the carriers, the guys that actually run their networks, on how open source is going to be secured and how secure is it really. They instinctively say to themselves, well, clearly Linux is being used by the NSA and by banking institutions and other people who need very high security, so clearly open source can be made secure, but they're not convinced that it is. And so there's going to be a large effort put in initially with this working group to try to address that fear. And it might result in some extra work being done, or it might just be education that is all that's needed. Ultimately, in the long run, we might produce a framework or a design architecture or a reference or a specification that can be used in RFIs when these guys are going out to market to look for new suppliers, to which we can all comply to, so that the designers, the developers have some target to point to so they can demonstrate to their customers that they have met the basic requirements for security. But since we just started this conversation, I'm just speculating about where we can go, and we'll know more as this group continues working. It is right now a mostly North American organization. We're going to expand beyond that as soon as we can, but we do have all the major players in terms of carriers, software developers in the NFVI layer, as well as a lot of the OEMs and the actual solutions providers. And we're going to grow that as we go forward. And hopefully in the June timeframe, we'll announce a call for participants, set up a pricing model so that we can fund the program, and then start delivering product out of that. And that's what we're working on at the TIA. I'm a little bit early on my presentation, so I'll take any questions at this time that you guys might have.
Hi, Franklin, I was wondering, Lyndon Ong with Sienna. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the NFV lab that you're planning, what the objectives of the lab are, and what you envision the lab consisting of.
Certainly. So I had a long experience working at Dell when they were developing their NFV program, Dell Computers, or I guess they're not called that anymore, Michael Dell's company. During that time, there was a desire to try to find a common accepted compatibility solution so that we could go in and just sell the hardware and the appropriate services, and it would go well. But there was a lot of ecosystems that just inherently weren't compatible with one another, and the carriers were frustrated with that. They didn't like it that they could go to one ecosystem and put together most of a solution, but if they wanted a component that wasn't in that ecosystem, it became a very complicated project to try to make that happen. And so there was a desire to find a way to get to that dream goal of a general compatibility between all the VNF and NFV components that go into the network, into the section. Clearly, there will be advantages and disadvantages to working with partners and things like that. They're already designing together, but there should be general compatibility. And so there was a lot of excitement when we first talked about this in the fall of trying to build an environment, a sandbox of components where we could put things together in ways that the carriers and network operators would want demonstrate that it functions and gets the jobs done, maybe show a little bit of performance or security or uptime out of that, and then allow for everyone to see that there is compatibility in the space. We believe there's more compatibility than is perceived by the customers today, but there's also a lot of incompatibility when it takes 6 months to get one proof of concept to even work. That is concerning. And so there was a goal to try to move in that direction. I do believe it's a little early to put a lab together like this, but we're starting on that discussion now, and we're getting the people excited about the idea behind it with a long-term goal of having that kind of design. The target proof of concept that the carriers got most excited about was the idea of having multiple NFV stacks lined up next to each other and connected via a WAN technology or something like that, and then running one VNF across all of them and showing performance, service assurance, operationalization, visibility, the whole thing, because that's the kind of compatibility they're looking for. They want to be able to, if it's beneficial to them, have different suppliers providing identical components in different parts of their network. They also want to be able to connect to each other's networks effectively, and that's not going to happen unless we have some compatibility. And if anyone's interested in talking to me and potentially helping steer the way this lab gets built, I'm open to that as well. As I said, we're a member organization, so input from you guys is what makes us work. Any other questions?
It's going to be like all speakers talking to each other here. Craig Moscow with SDX Central. You talked a little bit about open source and the security questions there.
Yep.
What else about NFV worries carriers? And when it comes to security, like, is there something else inherent in the structure or the nature of where they're going to have to get the software that bothers them?
I'm going to go out on a limb and take the risk of saying there's a lot of ignorance about it. This is a wholly new way of designing and building networks. There's less control. They know they can't do an 18 to 24-month pilot and test every single aspect before they put it out there. And once they put it out there, they know that they're going to be changing it. There's going to be patches that are going out, things like that, and they can't have these 18-month development cycles for every single one of those. They also know that software has a lot more vulnerabilities than purpose-built silicon. And that just scares them in general. So I think a lot of the aspect is they just want someone to assure them that what they're looking at and planning on delivering is secure, at least as much as it's possible. They completely accept the fact that there's going to be risks, there's going to be things that people didn't plan for, there's going to be holes that are discovered that no one even dreamed were there. They're comfortable with that concept. They fear it, but they realize that's what the future is going to look like. But there's a lot of things they just don't know. Like how do you secure every single virtual interface in the network when you have 900 different components all connected together into a service chain? That's scary. In the old model, they would go to one big, huge SI. They would work together, and they'd sign an SLA saying not only will you get the uptime you expect, but it also will be secure within reason. Right? They're not going to have as much of that in the future. And so there is a concern around that. So I believe that a spec similar to what NEBS or FIPS or something like that is, that they can all kind of get behind and say, yeah, I get it. You're making an effort. If you stay within these guidelines, we're confident that we get general security. I think that's what they're looking for. And once again, that's a lot of me speculating and having opinions. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I'm done a little bit early. Thank you.